I've clicked onto the Global Tropical Overview for August the 21st, 2023. As is always the case in these videos, the thoughts expressed are mine alone, and when making decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones, look towards your local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. We have several systems active in the U.S., or not the U.S., in the North Atlantic today. Hillary is over the United States, and see the Weather Prediction Center for information on that. I'm not going to be talking about that today, as it's no longer a tropical cyclone. It's well inland over the western United States. But we're going to stay in the Atlantic today, as we have so many systems still active. We have PTC 9, potential tropical cyclone 9, in the Gulf of Mexico, and as it comes towards Texas, it is likely to become a tropical storm before it makes landfall. Likely right now, the timing is tomorrow morning. We have Tropical Storm Franklin here in the Caribbean. This is about to make its northward turn by the looks of things into Hispaniola, and may be a significant rainfall event for Hispaniola, and might even bring some rainfall to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. We also have Tropical Storm Gert here, just barely managed to get named east of the Leeward Islands, and despite it being fairly close to the islands, adverse impacts over the region will likely be, if not all, entirely from Franklin. As you can see, Gert's and thunderstorm activity is pushed off towards the east as it's getting sheared by Franklin pretty strongly there on the satellite imagery. We also have the remnants of Emily here. It's void of convection now. You can see just the circulation spinning through the Atlantic basin. And you can see this general northwestward motion, which is going to continue, and eventually the system will be turning more northerly over the central Atlantic. And there is some possibility that it might encounter a more favorable environment in the central Atlantic, and it might have a low chance at redeveloping. But right now, that chance is very low at this time, and even if it did that, it would stay out to sea and no impacts to land are expected. We have Invis 92L here east of Emily, and this system is now clearing out of the Cabo Verde Islands and is moving northwest, and as it does so, it is likely to become a tropical cyclone, but it's not likely to be too strong. You can see some of the Saharan air here still north of the system, and this will be an issue for the storm as it goes through. And we'll probably not talk about this too much over the next several days, but there are some models trying to do some things with it long range, and if that does occur, then we'll have to talk about it at some point later down the line. But let's deal with what we've got first, which is PTC 9 and Tropical Storm Franklin, and I'm going to go first in depth on Tropical Storm Franklin. If you're here just for potential Tropical Cyclone 9, by the way, I have timestamps in the description, so you can skip to that. You can skip the entire section of Franklin and go straight to PTC 9. But let's go to a zoomed in visible loop of Tropical Storm Franklin here, and it's been an interesting past 24 hours for the system. Remember, yesterday we had confirmed that this was a tropical cyclone. We had a well-defined low-level center underneath deep convection south of Puerto Rico. Now, the system has continued to move west, and now the question is, when is the system going to make its northward turn here? And the expectation is that it's going to make that turn fairly soon and come into around central Hispaniola on the southern coast. Now, alongside that, we've had a question today of exactly how well defined is Franklin Center. We got an ASCAT pass, actually two of them earlier today, that it showed the center more of a trough axis more so than an area of low pressure. Now, something that seems to be happening today is the low-level center is either being tugged underneath this convection or it's just reforming entirely. Something that might point to that is if you look at the early part of this loop, we had pretty strong northeasterlies on the western side of the convection. Now, if you look in the most recent frames, this is more turned into easterly flow, and what this might indicate is that the center has either been tugged underneath this convection further, or this old boundary here, which was shown to be a trough axis more so in the ASCAT passes we got earlier today, has more so weakened, and we now are getting a new circulation forming under here. We do know that there is a low-level center here under this convection around there where I marked it under the convection, as we do have a recon plane in there right now, and you can see this is from the radar on the tail of the plane, and you can see a fairly well-defined low-level center there, and you can also see that in the wind barbs here on the overall analysis from recon here with the general center of circulation right about there. Now, the system has really not changed intensity too much. We did have a lot of deep convection form over the system yesterday, but it's sometimes hard to tell exactly if that convection is organized and if it's actually strengthening the system. It turns out that that convection last night was not strengthening it. That was a theory last night, and that theory is confirmed now as we really have the system still the same strength. Recon has winds estimated to be about 45 miles per hour, or sorry, 45 knots, so it'll be about 50 miles per hour. And the pressure has only changed a little bit. I think it's gone up a couple millibars since yesterday's mission. So the system is still fairly steady right now in terms of intensity, but it has struggled a little bit. And struggle is to be expected as we do have some shear impinging upon the storm. If we mark where the center is estimated to be, you can see that a lot of the convection is pushed off towards the east, and the mid-level center is more here, so there is a little bit of tilt. Now, admittedly, this is less of a tilt than when the center was, say, over here when we had those strong northeasterlies earlier today. So the tilt is a little bit better, and given this less tilt and given the organized convection over the center, it appears that now Franklin might intensify gradually towards Hispaniola. We don't expect rapid development because of this tilt, though, because it is still getting sheared. If I go to the water vapor loop, you can see that shear here. We've got generally southwesterly flow impinging upon it, and that will keep it at bay, will keep that structure tilted. And as long as that is the case, rapid intensification is not anticipated here, and we're likely just to see some gradual strengthening before landfall in the Dominican Republic. Now, the landfall in Hispaniola is fairly important in Franklin's life. There's a lot of questions here on exactly what is going to happen here. This is a GFS model, and we have seen a bit of a track west here with the GFS. Remember yesterday the GFS was taking us into eastern Hispaniola. Now we're getting the system to come into central Hispaniola on the model. Now, the European is still on the idea of the system coming out here south of Haiti, then turning north. Now, something I've noticed with the European is despite recon data, the model is still very, very weak with Franklin. Now, I'm not saying this is impossible. It is absolutely possible that this shear may become a little bit more inhibitive for Franklin, and it could weaken the structure a little bit more, maybe to a level similar to the European, what it has here. Though, I do feel like the European is a little bit too weak here. That is something that the model does tend to do. Now, if the system were to be weaker, like the European does suggest, it would be more likely to track more west before coming north. Reason being, and I can show you this on a sounding from the GFS, if we look at a sounding, the low-level flow is about what you'd expect in the Caribbean with the trade winds. It's very easterly, and if you have a structure like the European has, it's more likely going to feel that flow more so than everything else up here. Whereas if you have a tropical cyclone formed like we have now, and like the GFS has formed in its run, it would more likely feel more of this mid-level flow and have more of a push to come further north. And that is what the National Hurricane Center seems to be going with now, because we have a tropical cyclone now. Now, they have sort of gone a mean solution between the European and GFS, and that appears to be the best. If I were to say one that I'd be leaning more towards, it would be the GFS in this scenario, just based on that we have a formed tropical cyclone right now. And the European, it does have a formed system right now on the model analysis. It just weakens it over time. Now, the question is, exactly how does the system interact with the higher terrain of Hispaniola? In the GFS scenario, like yesterday, when it came over the eastern Dominican Republic, that's an area of lower topography, so it really would not have impacted the system too much. Now, with the system coming in further west on the model, we're a little bit into the higher terrain here. In fact, the highest terrain of Hispaniola runs about here from the western Dominican Republic into eastern Haiti. So this is a pretty significant change here for Franklin. And in theory, this system is able to completely open up into a wave or a trough after its passes through Hispaniola here. Now, it is forecast to be a weaker system, so we might just see that take place to where the low-level center might dissipate here over Hispaniola, and we actually get a new development somewhere here on the northern coast of Hispaniola. But for short-term intensification after Hispaniola, the interaction with the land does dictate what happens there. If we have, a strengthening tropical storm after the island, or if we still have to wait for Franklin to regenerate potentially north of the Caribbean islands. Now, regardless of exactly the intensity or where it comes into Hispaniola, the system will likely be a significant rainfall event. Here's the rainfall forecast from the GFS, and you can see very significant totals here of 3 to 500 millimeters here on the southern coast of the Dominican Republic. Now, a lot of the totals here in Haiti and the northwestern Dominican Republic are a bit sparse, most likely because the highest terrain here. But keep in mind, and keep this in mind as well for Puerto Rico, with the higher terrain, if you get onshore flow into those islands and the mountainous terrain, you can still get some pretty significant rainfall. We've seen this with Hillary in the western United States. Of course, not saying it's going to be that bad, but you could still get some enhanced rainfall here because of the higher topography there. So this is still going to be a significant system, even though it's only going to be a tropical storm. That's the word of caution there. Don't say it's only a tropical storm, as tropical storms can always be very significant. And you can see here, the European generally agrees on that forecast here with heavy rainfall totals in southern Hispaniola. Now, this is the forecast from the Weather Prediction Center for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. You can see fairly low totals overall in the mountainous terrain on the southern island of Puerto Rico and into the U.S. Virgin Islands. We have 2 to 4 inches of rain forecast, and that's for, again, that potential onshore flow, which could lead to some locally higher totals there. Now, the future of Franklin after Hispaniola. We have some confidence today, or at least increased confidence, that after Hispaniola, the system is going to, at some point, turn more northward after it passes through the Caribbean islands. Now, exactly how far west or east this system is, not sure. That's something that is highly uncertain at this time. This is a 7-day plus forecast, so naturally you're going to have that uncertainty. But what we can tell you is, for those in Bermuda, you really do need to just pay attention to Franklin over the coming days. There is potential for the system to make its way towards the island, and we could have some direct impacts there, including tropical storm force winds, maybe even hurricane force winds as it comes through. Now, the general pattern remains sort of the same as yesterday. We still have this ridge here east of Franklin that builds, and we have a general shortwave trough here over the Great Lakes that dives into the United States and the Ohio Valley and the mid-Atlantic. Now, alongside that, we also had a trough dig in earlier on this run. You can see that here. This trough has carried the storm further north. It's kicked it north on the eastern or western fringe of this ridge as well. And in this general pattern, you would generally have, troughing here, ridging here, this system coming north. And this would generally be a pattern of a track east of the United States and not really a landfall here. Now, of course, this is 7 days plus out. As I said yesterday, there's a lot of uncertainty here, and it's impossible to tell you exactly where the storm is going to be. The European at day 7 has this system much further southwest, and this could lead to potentially some impacts to the eastern seaboard as it tracks up the coastline here around this ridge and with this trough here over the United States. So, while we're not expecting direct impacts here, and while it's impossible to tell you if it's going to make landfall in the United States or get very close to Bermuda, it's just important that along the coastline in the United States and in Bermuda, you pay attention to your local weather office and the National Hurricane Center advisories, as there might be some reason to watch this. And make sure you have your hurricane preparedness kit ready, not only for Franklin, but it's getting towards the peak of hurricane season. Just make sure you have that ready just in case a storm comes at you later this season. Now, here's the National Hurricane Center forecast coming out through this weekend, and you can see that general track, as we talked about, going through Hispaniola. Tropical storm warnings here along the entire southern coast. Tropical storm watches along the northern coast of the Dominican Republic, and the tropical storm watch now in effect here for the eastern Turks and Caicos Islands. And after the passage of Hispaniola, you can see that general track here intensifying into a hurricane south of Bermuda is starting to make that northward turn. Now, again, lots of uncertainty here, and of course we'll have to talk about that as the days go on, and of course I'll have future videos talking about Franklin's future as we get more certain about that. Alright, that was a lot for Franklin, but now we're going to move to potential tropical cyclone 9 here in the Gulf of Mexico. And if you're unfamiliar with the term potential tropical cyclone, this is so that the National Hurricane Center can issue tropical storm watches or warnings in an event that a system is likely to become a tropical cyclone and impact land within 48 hours. But it's not a tropical cyclone yet. 91L, or former 91L, 9L here is not a tropical cyclone at this time, but it is likely to bring tropical storm force winds to the southern coast of Texas, and it's likely to form into a tropical cyclone today. Now, we have seen some pretty good improvements today. We've seen a lot of organized convection developing around the center, and you can even see that the trough axis around it has gotten more sharp. You can see southerly winds here on the eastern side curling around sharply to northerly winds on the western side. We might even be getting some semblance of westerly winds on the southern side. Now, we have had recon flying in here, and I'll reload it so we actually get the updated data here. And you can see we have a broad center here. It looks like maybe there, but it's not really compact yet. And what we really want to be looking for is the center to become more compact and see a lot of the convection become more organized over that compact center. It's close to a tropical cyclone, but not there yet. Now, here's a water vapor loop, and the environment overall is fairly favorable. We have, again, an upper trough here digging over the Bahamas and Florida. This is enhancing some outflow on the eastern side, and we also have this upper low here over Mexico. This is enhancing some of the outflow towards Texas. Now, this upper low will impinge some shear upon PTC9 as it comes west, as it is in the low levels. The flow is generally westerly underneath the ridge, the very strong ridge over the United States this week, and this flow from the upper low is more southeasterly, so that will impinge some shear upon the system, though it's not likely to be too inhibitive. And really all that's going to do is push a lot of the thunderstorm activity to the northern side of the system, and maybe we can get some more rainfall into central Texas to tackle some of the drought. Now, that's one good news item with this storm. Or actually, there's two, really. The system's not likely to be strong, as it is going to run out of time before it can really significantly intensify here. And you can see that on the forecast. It's forecast to come in early tomorrow morning near Brownsville and Corpus Christi. But alongside that, it's going to bring more beneficial rain to areas that need it. We've had a very warm and dry, or not warm is an understatement, hot and dry summer here in South Texas and northern Mexico, and it would just be beneficial to get some rain here. Now, the National Hurricane Center forecasts this to have winds of about 45 miles per hour as it comes in, and that seems a bit fair to me. The system will likely consolidate within the next several hours here. I wouldn't be surprised to see a tropical cyclone form tonight or really early tomorrow morning before it comes into the coastline there in Texas. Now, we do have tropical storm warnings in place. You can see that they're from Brownsville to Corpus Christi and just up the coastline from Rockport, and a tropical storm watch further up the coastline just southwest of Houston. Now, the rainfall here, you can see the forecast from the Weather Prediction Center. Lots of the rain kept to southern Texas. Hopefully we can get some rainfall into central Texas, but with the strong ridge up north, it seems pretty unlikely that is going to happen. But you can see general totals of 2 to 4 inches, with locally higher totals of 4 to 6 in South Texas. And if a lot of this does come in a short period of time, which is absolutely possible with these tropical systems, we might have some issues with flash flooding, and the Weather Prediction Center has issued a slight risk here of excessive rainfall from, say, Corpus Christi and south and towards Brownsville, towards the U.S.-Mexico border. So we could have some flooding issues there. And of course, if you see a flooded roadway, don't drive through it, turn around, don't drown. But this is generally a neat system to see, not going to be too strong, and it's really going to tackle the drought there in South Texas. So more beneficial, and we're lucky that this system does not have more time. If it had formed into a tropical cyclone back here in the eastern Gulf of Mexico and had more time over the Gulf of Mexico, we could have had a big issue there. But thankfully, things turned out right here, and we're likely more to have just a weak tropical storm here coming into South Texas tomorrow morning. That's a lot going on in the tropics today, but that's all for today. A lot of systems active, and I'll continue to have video uploads throughout this week going over all these systems. Stay safe in the Caribbean islands being affected by Franklin, and be safe in the western United States being impacted by Hillary, and of course be safe in northern Mexico and southern Texas as PTC9 moves through. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.